What's going on, you guys? So I was watching the Shakur Stevenson Joe Rogan interview, and for the most part the interview was pretty good. A lot of it was just boxing talk, right? I mean, Shakur Stevenson's now become one of the best boxers in the world, and he's getting that recognition from mainstream media. We've seen him go on there with Stephen A. Smith and now Joe Rogan, and it's a good thing to see, because I feel like Shakur Stevenson has been one of the more deserving guys of the spotlight. But during this interview, there were quite a bit of things that were pretty interesting, that they were talking about. But what I wanted to touch on in this video was toward the end of the interview, Joe Rogan, was talking about Roy Jones Jr. He brought up Manny Pacquiao as well. And these are two guys that I've bashed on as of late, for steroid use, whether it was, they legit got caught or, a lot of it was speculation, right, when it came to Manny Pacquiao. Because Manny Pacquiao never tested positive, but I don't know anybody in the whole history of the sport that's went up 8 weight classes and had punching power in every single one of them, and then looked completely ripped in every single weight class as well, along with keeping their speed, their just the way they look physically. You may see certain guys go up in weight, but they don't look completely ripped. I mean, Roberto Duran fought forever and also fought in a lot of weight classes. This is a guy that was a lightweight champion and then went all the way up to middleweight and I believe even super middleweight, but his frame didn't look like it belonged in those weight classes. When he fought Iran Barkley was a true middleweight and looked completely ripped, and Roberto Duran did not. So when they brought these guys up, I found it really funny, like I said, because these are two guys in particular who I've bashed on as of late. But Shakur Stevenson didn't seem to be, aware of the fact that Roy Jones Jr. tested positive for steroids, right? And he didn't want to, Joe Rogan was kind of alluding that, hey, dude, Roy Jones Jr. probably juiced up for the John Ruiz fight when he went up to heavyweight, to be the first guy to start at middleweight and go all the way up to heavyweight and win a legit world title. So Joe Rogan didn't say it, but there's actual proof that this guy tested positive for steroids. And a lot of people don't know that, or they just don't realize, right? If you guys don't recall, back in 2000, he fought Richard Hall at light heavyweight. And both him and Richard Hall actually tested positive for testosterone, right? So it makes you wonder, about Roy Jones Jr. and his career. And if he's going to get tested positive for a Richard Hall, who, I mean, wasn't a complete bum, but he wasn't a Bernard Hopkins, he wasn't a James Toney, he wasn't on the level of those guys. But if he's going to get juiced up for Richard Hall, who's to say he wouldn't get juiced up for those guys I just mentioned, or any other potential big fight, during the rise of his, his career. So I honestly think Roy Jones Jr., was a complete juice head. Roid head Roy, was juicing dang near his whole career. And then Joe Rogan even touched on it when he came back down after beating Ruiz, because I believe this is what started this initial conversation, was him putting on that much weight and looking completely ripped at heavyweight, and then having to cut back down to fight Antonio Tarver at light heavyweight, right? Losing 25 pounds of muscle. It wasn't good for Roy Jones Jr.'s body. But I think Roy Jones Jr., just like I said, he said he not only had to cut that weight, but he probably wasn't on juice anymore. If your body's, used to you using anabolic steroids and you just stop, you're going to look like dog crap, right? And that's exactly what we saw. And I think that was the first time we probably seen Roy Jones Jr. Not be on performance enhancing drugs. Like, let's keep it a buck. Like, anybody who believes Roy Jones Jr. you know, and for a long time I did. I believed that he wasn't a dirty fighter. You know, I just thought he was just so athletically God-gifted, and, you know, who knows, he could have very well been, but I think anabolic steroids definitely have a huge help for that. But I just found that part interesting in the interview, you know, and even Joe Rogan, he's not an idiot, you know. He also touched on a lot of other fighters that been caught on steroids, you know, or you know, let's say a lot of people speculated, Manny Pacquiao being one of them, and then even Artur Beterbiev I found was pretty interesting. You know, he had a atypical finding in, you know, his first sample, and this was just a couple years ago. And a lot of people were like, oh, Artur Beterbiev just has naturally crazy power. Well, you also got to realize this dude comes from Russia, and that's all we see these guys do in the Olympics is just cheat and get caught on performance-enhancing drugs. So, I don't know. I don't want to lump him in with, you know, the Olympic team for Russian athletes, but I mean, that's a lot of the case for a majority of these Eastern European fighters is they're cheating. And that's just fact. You know, that you're talking about a whole country getting banned from competing in any Olympic sport because of the not only scandals, but, you know, legit findings of a whole team, you know, in an Olympic event cheating. They were cycling out urine. I believe this was the cycling team that ruined it for them, but are we really going to play stupid and act like there's not a lot more other, you know, athletes in different sports cheating as well? I mean, I believe this has been a thing, shoot, for probably close to, I mean, 50 to 70 years now. I mean, it's crazy. But overall, man, those are my thoughts. I found it pretty interesting to see these guys talking about stuff that, you know, I've brought to light, and people hate me for it. But I don't care. I'm going to keep on bringing it to light. But let me know what your guys' thoughts are, man. Not only just on this interview, but the things that they talked about as well, right? Let me know. Hate, like, comment, subscribe.